Hello, and welcome to the Argyle CMO Leadership Summit. My name is Eric Wallace with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before we begin our discussion. To ask questions during the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Today, we have Jennifer McAlpine, who is Director, Marketing Technology at My Home, a Williston Financial Group company. We're also joined by Joe McNamara, who is founder of Joe McNamara Consulting. We're excited to have Jennifer and Joe here today for a fireside chat called Delivering Value with Agile Marketing. Let's begin.
Hello, hi, I am Jennifer McAlpine, and I am a marketing technology director with My Home, which is a part of Williston Financial Group as well.
Hey everybody, I'm Joe McNamara. I am a senior marketing professional. I've been in the space now for the better part of a decade. Most recently, focused in the financial services space with stints at both Pascus and prior to that, Annual Right Source.
Great. Well, it's great to be here. I think we're just going to start, and we have a few questions that we're going to go over. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the first one, and Joe and I, we're just going to have a little conversation. So Joe, what do you mean when you're talking about agile marketing?
Well, great kickoff question there, Jen. I think for starters, I think agile marketing is a relatively general term when we kind of look at the various processes and frameworks that folks have put into place. But at the source of it, or kind of the core of it, when I think of it, agile marketing, what I really think of is the opportunity to structure an ongoing series of events or campaigns in a way that allow you to really focus on the interaction between you or your organization as well as your audience, and being able to kind of make adjustments in near or real time when it comes to ensuring that you're continuing that connection with that audience, as well as making those tweaks as you start to see some of the other trends that come out of the woodwork, if you will. But like I mentioned, it's more of a generalized term that I think a lot of folks can kind of define for themselves. But from your perspective, what do you think of when you hear agile marketing?
Yeah. So what's interesting is there's so many things that, like, when my background has been in e-commerce and then into real estate. And so back in my e-commerce days, I started doing these types of things, what is considered agile marketing. And it was just things of reaction, right? Of working really fast and growing really fast. And so a lot of these things I think of is, kind of breaking out different campaigns and then using kind of the principles of, agile methodology and applying that to marketing. So kind of breaking out and having almost specialties, whether it be like advertising content, your comms plans, website, but it's segmented, but it's also centered around almost like customers, right? It's getting into their head and having regular delivery. It's not something that is so stagnant. So you're always constantly getting in their head and being able to adapt as well, because you're ultimately solving problems for them. And so that's why I kind of think of it.
No, and great points, right? Like when I think of, the overall landscape today, I think one of the underlying assumptions of many, if not all of these audience groups, is kind of the idea of instant gratification. Like, I think, thanks a lot, Amazon, in terms of, really physically manifesting that. But I think it certainly goes deeper from a psyche perspective, to your point around, understanding, kind of getting into your audience's head and fully verifying either assumptions that you came in with from a campaign's perspective, but at the same time also, instigating additional learnings, right, and kind of debriefings with some of those specialists. You brought up too the opportunity to kind of really pinpoint different areas within kind of an overall marketing function. So I'm curious, from an advantageous perspective, what are some of the major advantages that we see in agile marketing?
So yeah, I definitely, understand what you're saying, and I absolutely identify with it too. So I would say some of the advantages of adopting agile marketing are you get to learn at a more rapid rate, right? Things just happen a lot more quickly. But the ability to apply that learning and making adjustments in almost real time across your channels gives you that ability to grow that much more quickly, and it affects all of your campaigns, right? So if you are able to apply that knowledge from maybe your paid advertising to things that you're doing within your comms plan or with on things in your website, and taking that information and applying across those channels, you're really able to hone in on what those needs are of your customer, and being more adaptive, and you're able to really attract, engage, and delight, right? And you can deliver marketing programs more regularly and more frequently, so you can actually do more as well.
And again, I highly doubt that you or I are going to debate much when it comes to this topic. But at the same time, you bring up some really good points. I think the other thing that's super crucial too is, understanding just how fluid the market is too. Like to your point, adopting kind of an agile marketing framework allows you to be dynamic. It allows you to, again, kind of keep your finger on the pulse when it comes to, what your audiences are looking for, what your customer bases are really interested in, and it helps you avoid some of the long-term, I want to say Hindenburgs that we've certainly seen in the past, and I'm sure we've all kind of experienced it, where it's like, yeah, here's a project that we kicked off 6 or 12 months ago, and we're almost ready to launch, and we're so excited about it. Come to find out, launch day or sometime, prior to that, it's really not going to have much of an effect. Or even worse yet, is you kind of launch it and you expect, this big change, and what you end up with is just crickets, right? And so that ability to be able to, again, just be super dynamic with your reaction, and kind of shorten that reaction time, I think certainly proves that there's a value there. But I also think that there are probably some cons to that, and I think one of the biggest pitfalls, at least that I've experienced, is underestimating just how important it is to kind of go into it from a strategic approach as well, right? And being able to ladder or tie back these dynamic sprints within your agile framework to better deliver not only learnings and obviously reactions, but at the same time, how is this kind of scaling up to alignment with your organization strategy and your marketing function strategy as well?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And to touch on that too, I've definitely been a part of marketing in different organizations to where it's not necessarily in alignment with that. And you have to kind of filter through that and be able to work within that environment. And maybe it's something that you can't necessarily apply everything, but you can start with things that are small and kind of show incremental value from there as well. And then also too, and I know that we'll talk about this a little bit as well, but within, if you're working with employees and really kind of finding, okay, we have to have a heightened level of communication and being able to work in a very team-driven environment. And if maybe there is a transition going on there, or if that needs to be changed, you have to have time to work on that as well. So, but with that being said too, what do you think the needs are to go into an agile marketing framework or strategy? What are thoughts on that?
Well, I think another good question. I think there's two that you mentioned. The first is certainly personnel, right? And ensuring that you've got the right team to kind of orchestrate and launch, as well as tactically deliver on very short turnarounds and kind of sprint timelines. But I'd also argue, that the communication piece is really key. And I think, you could plug anybody up in this seat and essentially say, what are the keys to business? And I guarantee one of them is going to be people, and the other one's going to be communications, right? But nonetheless, I still really I hold true to that, and especially when it comes to some of the more intricate style campaigns that you can run. At the end of the day, it's kind of assessing, especially if you're kind of overseeing or directing, is really assessing the skill set of the team that you have, as well as potential barriers or even gaps, right? And one of the great things about just the agile framework is it allows you to kind of go outside of the normal parameters or bounds of your marketing function and look for additional insight across the organization, or even better yet, Hopefully you've established some really good communication with existing customers or previous ones, where you can kind of draw from them and essentially say, hey, here's what we're thinking about doing, or here's what we're doing right now and what we're seeing. From your perspective, what are we missing, right? Or what are some outstanding KPIs that we might not be paying as close attention to? But ultimately I think it also kind of comes down to what your preference is. For me, I've been able to kind of build teams at different levels and at different places that they all operate differently. But interested to hear kind of your insight as well, especially as it relates to people and personnel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's some great insight as well. And I think you hit on some key points too. One of the things that I had noted too is when thinking through this is, having a team that welcomes change and adaptability, continuous improvement, and almost aligning with that inbound marketing concept too. And this is not always the setup, right? It's a lot easier when you're able to build your own team.
Oh yeah.
But if you don't have that, I think us as leaders need to kind of take that into consideration and be active in that process to really understand our staff and be an understanding of what they're really good at and how that fits within this framework. Because if what the experience that I've had too is that when you're asking teams to work at this rate, be very adaptable to change, it's a little bit more unique. And so usually they tend to want to grow too, like that personality will want to grow, will want to do more. So keeping pace with that as a leader and a people manager and being able to watch for that and coach them and being able to implement, but it also not only helps them, but it helps what you're doing as well and what you're doing within Agile marketing, because if they want to grow, that just benefits, your plans as well. Collaboration between team members and departments, it is really cannot be a siloed situation at all. Transparency and that real level of transparency, I found that is really important, and having that and kind of as a leader also, encompassing that environment and showing people, yes, we want you actually to speak up. We want you actually to give that feedback because it is so important. And also having either an individual or someone that can do project management for it and kind of help move everything along and collectively move that process. And then just, doing a little bit test, you're going to have those marketing, fundamentals that you're going to continue to use, but also is implementing and integrating few levels of change so you can get that quick feedback. And so you can, learn from this process again and again and be able to grow and move that needle too.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, the one point that you brought up that is just super crucial is definitely around that transparency, right? To your point, eliciting those feedback loops and ensuring that, you're getting the correct views from multiple angles. But I also think it stands to kind of call out, setting realistic expectations, right? Like, at the end of the day, you can't rightfully expect a team to kind of perform at that pace without stumbling or hitting some blocks along the way. And so as much as it is about leading a team and ensuring that hey, you guys have support from a perspective of, I fully expect that you're not going to bat 1,000. Like I fully expect we're going to fall flat on our face at some point.
Yes.
It's as much about learning from that as it is about just being successful. And obviously, like you want to have more successes than failures, but I think it also stands to call out that as you're working with executive stakeholders and at the end of the day, like the folks that are going to be funding these activities is just again being as transparent as you can about what you anticipate and what you're setting out to go accomplish and why you feel that this is the correct path. And kind of reiterating again, like, guys, we're not going to get everything right here, but it's very crucial for us to kind of try these things, because if we don't, and we kind of stick to what's always worked or what we've always done, then we're clearly missing out on the opportunity to potentially evolve over time and stay as close as we used to be with our changing audiences.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the button right there. And I've also found that a key component to that, especially when you were dealing with, executive stakeholders and that sort of thing as well, along with other departments, is setting up those expectations from the beginning and getting the buy-in from everyone. And so coming to the table with a feedback plan, but also being versatile enough to welcome feedback yourself to adjust. And then taking those learnings, and almost like what I would always implement too is having like that post-mortem for every time that we're having a sprint or we're having a particular a new marketing endeavor. And, like you said, and you're not going to bat 1,000, right?
It's impossible.
It's not going to happen. So going into that with that understanding and that knowledge, I think really does help. And then taking all that and then reapplying it each and every time, right? It's like having that pattern and then keep on going through it.
Completely agree. And it leads me down the path of, you mentioned kind of the debrief or the post-mortem, right? Is identifying in the same sense of being proactive to, focus on where and how you want to measure the success of these campaigns. I think a lot of times, and myself included in this boat, you can fall victim to like, oh man, that's such a great idea. Or like, yes, absolutely. Let's get this campaign up and running. And then you kind of look back on it and you go, well, I want to answer this question, but I didn't necessarily set up the campaign to track those particular data points. And it makes it that much more difficult to kind of, rationalize that not only to your team who's, tactically executing, but again, to some of your other fellow stakeholders where it's like, yeah, this was successful. And the first question you're going to get is, okay, like how successful and why was it successful? And if you come in and you say, well, it felt really good, or like my gut says it went really well, that's probably not going to be a very advantageous conversation for you.
No, I totally agree. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I think that brings us to our next question too, is what data do you need to practice agile marketing? So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh man. I think it will depend, especially depending on, the area of focus within that agile sprint. But ultimately, I think you need to look for credible results that, again, kind of tie back to the strategic approach to where you're trying to go. If your function is primarily focused on demand generation for, the next quarter or over the course of the next year, what kind of KPIs are you putting in place to ensure that you can measure those types of things like audience sentiment, and ensuring that, you're seeing, the traffic to areas that you expect to see based on the campaigns that you're running, or in similar sense, from a lead gen perspective, what do those numbers look like? Do you have you established your clear and concise definitions of, what a lead is versus a marketing qualified lead or an SQL, and all the way through, as well as, can you tie certain milestones to that? And, for me, it's always been kind of this ongoing learning process, and it's never as black and white as you want it to be, right? Because there's always going to be exceptions to the rules. But ultimately, I think going into it with a game plan of, here's what we're setting out to do, what we expect to excel at, or where we want to find success. And here's the very clear definition of how we expect to define it, are two very crucial and credible pieces of that. And the last part would be, at the same time, don't complicate it too much, right? Like you mentioned, you can get really specific and really, in tune with the different types of campaigns that you want to run, whether it be advertising or, brand awareness or whatever it happens to be. But the more things that you try to measure within these kind of one-off campaigns, the harder it's going to be to kind of realize like true measurable results, because you're going to be stuck on the fence between some of them and go, well, was this really a lead gen piece, or was this more of a brand awareness piece, right? Just as an example.
Right. No, I think you hit some great points there. And just to add to that, I would say I think you're absolutely correct too. It really depends on, what you're running and what type of data that you'll need to look at, what you're going to be looking at compared for an email marketing plan is going to be different from, the traffic that you're going to be looking on your website. so, but ultimately you need some form of analytics, or if it's like, I'm also involved in, real estate, and we do a lot of print marketing here. So what can we think around that of what we can do? And we put in different ideas like QR codes on print items so you can track them. So there's things that you can definitely do to implement that help you. And again, I'm always the person that is saying, sharing that type of communication and having a tracking process that, everybody knows what to do as well. And so I think that really helps move along that practice as well.
Well, and it kind of comes, right? Like it comes with the expectation, the requirement of some thick skin, because, it's not super easy when you kind of throw out this plan and you go, this is what we've been working on, right? And how we've been thinking about it. And it just takes one person to go, well, this looks dumb, or this doesn't make sense, or like, what are you doing here, right? And so,
yes,
to be able to develop these in a way where it's crystal clear, to your point, where, in the event that folks do have questions, it's less about the foundational elements of it and more about, a nuanced intricacy, right? Where, there might be a detail here or there, but at the same time, you're dealing with a ton of stakeholders, right? It's not just your marketing team or, just your sales team or just your operations team. A lot of times it's a combination of efforts. And so, one of the questions that I had, because my background is almost primarily B2B, right? And it sounds like you've got a little bit more of a mix between B2B and B2C. And so, I'm curious to kind of hear from your perspective, from a B2C model, how crucial is an agile marketing, framework, and, at what point does it become either too much, or should folks be looking for opportunities to essentially enact things?
Yeah. So this is, I think it needs to do like an assessment as well for enabling an agile framework. Is that one, it needs to align with your goals. Like, what are you looking to do? Are you looking for more rapid growth? Are you looking to change things on a more rapid basis? Because I think that, when assembling even a team, you need to understand too, it's like, okay, are these people going to be adaptable to those goals? Are they going to be able to handle it? And then also, I think just going through things and making sure that you have things set up to where it can be implemented. And so establishing this sometimes is getting buy-in, right, from a greater source. And sometimes you have to get approval, and that's not always easy. And I think kind of setting that up for success and some of those key elements are being able to have that, laying out your case of what you've been doing currently, what's working, what's not working, and then being able to set forth I think that we should do this for reasons X, Y, and Z, and then having a potential outcome that you think is going to be beneficial to them, and then being able to walk them through that, and then setting expectations for checking in and things like that. I've had to do this before, and it definitely, doing your work is essential, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And then also understanding those key components of the pain points that that your company is having, and being able to work within that and bring that out so you can hit on those components. And a lot of time when I have done this, I have gotten it approved because I put those elements together, because I want to put together this framework that, it's like, I know if we can just do this, it'll work. But you have to put it on paper, right? And being able to push that out and being able to explain it in a way that you need people to get their buy-in for and team up with you.
100%, right? And kind of the half step beyond that is kind of actually one of the questions that I wanted to cover, which is like, how are you tracking all of your marketing, technology? Is it, you mentioned, you need some metrics, you need some analytics, but from your experience, what's been the most successful either stack or, just in general, some of the tools that you've used to kind of stay on top of the findings as well as the reporting that comes shortly thereafter?
So it's been since I've been in such a variety, right, of different backgrounds, from e-commerce to real estate and a few different things in between. I've used a variety of different things, but I'll be honest with you, is a few things that I've used in between all of those that have helped me with the process is honestly just having really good project management software is one. And two is that having a way to collaboratively communicate. So even if that's something like Google Docs, or if that's even, I work in a lot in Canva now and things like that. But no matter what other type of stack or technology that you're using, is that you have to be able to take that information and move it forward and track it. And so that people know where to put the information in and how to use it. Because if you're getting great information from maybe somebody that's running an ad campaign and the other person doesn't get it on for their website or something like that, it just creates chaos and it slows down the process. So I think knowing that information and knowing just creating that base across whatever industry you're in is key. I don't know, what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, I for the most part, I would agree with you. And, it reminds me of a previous coworker of mine would say, is this an opportunity for us to plan, or are we kind of on the clock where we have to build the car while we're driving down the highway, right? And like,
Yeah.
to kind of tie it back to what you were saying, I completely agree when it comes to, identifying what the tools or stacks are going to be ahead of time. But then I would also say, there's a crucial element of ensuring buy-in that folks are going to use it, right? So to your point,
Yep.
if you're seeing these great results coming in from social ads, or from traffic on your website, is being able to trust the process that everyone that's involved understands, number one, how to use the tool, but then number two, this is kind of primary place to get together where all this information needs to go. Because to your point, as soon as you start to see these disconnects or these silos, what you end up with is a ton of disparate data that it's not as actionable, if at all, as it could be. And so, yeah, and I would agree, from a project management software, I think it's also super advantageous, if it's possible, to have, at least one or two folks on your team that are just wired that way. Like,
Yep.
I think some of the most successes I found in my career weren't because of anything I was doing. It really had to come down to the folks that I had hired that were just really good at the operational aspect, right? And being able to kind of keep things on track from a timeline perspective, from an organization perspective. And then, from the software perspective, like, no free ads here, but I would say, something, again, I've seen super complex things, like, whether you're a Microsoft project manager or like something in the middle, like, Monday.com. But I would even advocate, as long as everybody understands how to use an Excel spreadsheet, like, if that's what's going to be the least common denominator, like, that's what I would roll with, right? At the end of the day, it's about just making sure it's accessible and that folks have bought in when it comes to utilizing it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. So I think we'll probably hit our last question here. One I wanted to get in actually is a great one, because I think there's so many people that can identify it, right? Is how do you keep your short stand-up meetings from becoming time-consuming slogs? This is, I think that, the meetings are very, especially weekly meetings, right? And having that stand up and being able to talk through things. And I think it really helps your team. But let's face it, we all know they can go different ways and they can get really drawn out. And then it just takes away from the accomplishments that you're trying to do for that week and even that day. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree. I think there's quite a few different approaches to this. The success that I found was really, identifying kind of subsets within the team. And so, on a rolling schedule of like a weekly stand up, what I would do is essentially say, hey, from an audio visual or a content creation or, an SEO or, even a BI perspective, each of you guys are essentially going to own this meeting once a month, right? And be able to kind of, we'll take the first 10 to 15 minutes to kind of do, order of operations, ensure that, anything that's boiling over and needs to be addressed is addressed early. But then the rest of the time is essentially spent focused on a particular area that your team is involved in. And what I found is it allows, number one, it gives some of your younger professionals an opportunity to kind of stand up and do more than just say, yeah, sure, I can get that done, and really go into more detail about what they're doing, how it's been successful, what they anticipate, and what it's led to in most cases, a lot of organic additional conversation from others on the team. Like, my favorite types of calls are the ones where I just kind of have to open the call, say, hey guys, here's here's kind of the burning items, and then, I'm going to open the floor. And it takes a little bit of time, but once you've kind of gotten comfortable with that team and your team gets comfortable with kind of what they're focused on, a lot of times you kind of end up walking away from those sessions with just fantastic ideas, new ways to look at things, and ultimately there's an element of team camaraderie that comes with that. But how about you?
Yeah, definitely. I love what you're saying about having those features. I've definitely found that that's very helpful too. And like you're saying, eventually even newer employees, they have that, availability to speak up. And even if they don't want to, sometimes it's really good for them to do it and being pushed out of your comfort zone a little bit. What I've also found really helpful too is, yes, having those moments to where people can speak up, but I like to give a timed frame, like a timed area to where maybe it's 5 or 10 minutes to where people can speak up and say, hey, this is something that I'm dealing with right now. What are your thoughts? Like feedback forum almost.
Yeah.
And to where people can give a little bit of feedback, but it's timed, right? So it doesn't go outer limits. But it's also a great time to where if someone's having a pain point or if they need a little bit of help, but it's not so elaborate to where, okay, if I contact this person and this person, they might have an opportunity to answer it. They might have the answer. But if I'm in front of everyone, I am going to get answers from people I may not even have thought of that could give me an answer I didn't think of. So within those moments, I've definitely found that they help each other and you get things accomplished, where sometimes when it's for those questions that you didn't know enough to ask, and
Right.
then you kind of build on top of that. And so, but having the timed portion of it is really essential.
No, absolutely. And like the last point I would add is, it certainly allows you to kind of set your schedule for the week too, right? As you're kind of evaluating what those conversations look like, to your point, timing is very key. But if you've identified, or it's been identified, that there's a longer string to pull there, it certainly, at least it elevates it to your awareness, right? Where otherwise it might go unsaid or unnoticed, if you're just kind of going through the motions because it's that time of week again.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's been great. And I love this conversation. I hope everybody else has as well.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Eric, and the rest of the crew at Argyle.
Thank you all for that insightful discussion. I also want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event.